I'm not the person in authority to decide where the boundaries are going to go. That's a long process that involves multiple agencies at the state and federal level. And we can certainly speak to those agencies during the public processes and during private meetings about how we think the designations or the designations should be made and how the boundaries should be set. But that process may go on despite our best wishes, or what we think is plan A might be plan B to them, and we have to accept something that is unacceptable. Those things happen regardless because we have a small piece of the pie. But we have to be out there every day and not be discouraged, and we have to put forward a united front in describing to people what we think our needs are and push that activity. Now, in terms of people not being able to enjoy wilderness, there are many ways to enjoy wilderness. I go out on the landscape and I walk it and I enjoy it. I know that others can't do that, but they can participate in other ways. So there are people who can give their time and effort to engage in some of these resources that we have online, like Google Maps. They can tell us, I talked about intelligence gathering before, open source data. They can tell us, looking at series of maps, things that are changing over time and why they're changing, because they sit and they can't get out, but they can sit and contribute by putting their intellectual abilities to analyzing those maps and telling us what they see going on and what changes are available. I would love to have a cadre of individuals who did that work on their own, voluntarily, who could look at stuff with a keen eye based on whatever experience they have. They might be a housewife, they might be a professor, they might be a retired government official, somebody who has an interest in the issues that involve game and fish. And they could look at data sets, and they could look at maps, and they could look at photographs, and they could attend meetings in local communities and be our eyes and ears. I have, and do that in an open source way. So I'm not asking for people to skulk around and spy on one another. What I'm asking is people to get involved with the agency by using technology. And I think you'd find that there are a lot of people who would not be able to access the landscape because of their infirmities, but their brains are still great and they want to be involved in something. And if they're willing to do it, have them help do research for us in that way. So photographs, analyzing data, compiling information and presenting opinions for consideration. I think we don't do enough of that in public. Again, I used the phrase before, if you see something, say something. Well, that's not only the type of thing that the public should be doing, or we should be encouraging the public to do just when they're out, in their communities. But it involves, when they read the newspaper, when they get a newsletter, when they see photographs, when they're doing research on their own on some topic that they like. Perhaps they're bird watchers and they're interested in a specific bird. They're going to learn a lot of other incidental information while they're researching that bird. Some of it may be important to us in terms of how the habitat is changing or why it's changing and what the impacts are. They can present that information to us. We don't know it, we may not know it, but we can use that. And so I think we need to take an effort to have individuals join us, whether they can visit the wilderness area on their own or whether they can do it remotely. I think there's lots of tools out there that we could tell the public about and see if they're interested in helping us out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you tell us about a recent commission directive or rule that you support or disagree with, and why?
I'm actually going to, you used the word recent, I actually want to go back in time a little bit. There was an issue a few years ago with an effort in the town of Eager to build a fishing pond, and it became controversial because of excavations that were started, and then Indian Ruin was impacted. And the whole sort of plan blew up for the time being. So what started out as a recreational facility for young kids in the community and the public never got built in the way that was envisioned because of the problems. And what I saw was, in looking at it from an outsider's point of view, was that everybody was enthusiastic to get going, go forward, but probably not all the T's were crossed, not all the I's were dotted. And some of that involved, like, who was going out to do the cultural survey to clear the property, and how they did it and why. So, in my estimation, there wasn't enough time spent up front in that process to talk with all the interested parties to figure out what we needed to do before that facility could be built. And I think, I don't know that I could level a charge, but I would say sometimes putting the cart before the horse is the wrong thing to do. So I'm a process guy, and my answer to problems like that, for rules and regulations and changes to them and programs and facilities that we want to build, is to step through the process. Some people will complain that it takes too long or it takes too much money, and I say, let's take the time to make sure that we've conferred with everyone and that we've gone through all the steps of the process to make sure that we've finally got a green light to go ahead. I've had the same problem in my personal career working for the United States U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as a project manager. I had 16 projects, some of them as large as $265 million, run in phases over a number of years. You have to go through the phases step by step by step. And I would have people like congressmen and senators and the chief of engineers say to me, why does it take so long? What is it about this that takes so long? And the answer is, you have to go through the process and answer all the questions and all the issues to make sure that you can move to the next step. So a lot of times in Arizona, when I see something blow up, whether it's this agency's activities or some other agency's activities, there's somewhere along the line where there's a fault, and the fault is that they've missed a step or they've not carried it through to its logical conclusion. They've made a conclusion too soon and moved ahead when they should have taken some time. So I'm really into, as a former project manager, I'm into process. I'm making sure that the process works and that every step has been followed and that every T is crossed and every I is dotted. And I think that's the thing that 9 times out of 10 will save the project or save the process so that we can move forward and accomplish the goal that we've set. There's always an occasion where something comes up that we couldn't predict. We just deal with those as we have to. But we have to be able to show the public that they can have faith in us because we've followed the process that we've set up. And if the process isn't working, we've got to be able to adapt it. But if you were to ask me, I'm a process guy. So I would put people back through the steps until we're satisfied that, that the rule or the regulation or the policy or the activity is sufficient and adequate, and people can move forward without causing any harm to one another. Again, we're dealing with resources that are in the commons, and so we need to cast our net widely to talk with people to make sure that we've accomplished all the steps that we said we were going to take. Thank you.
The state of Arizona has a process in which the public may place legislative measures on the ballot to be voted on during general elections. What are your thoughts on the use of this voter initiative process as it pertains to managing wildlife?
The process is enshrined in the Arizona Constitution, and there have been some efforts recently to limit that. In fact, I think there's a bill on the ballot this year to limit some of that activity. But I think citizen propositions are a good thing. Sometimes you have propositions that are harebrained and they die a quick death. Sometimes you have propositions that are harebrained that seem to have some life and some legs. You have to be careful. But I'm not going to deny the public in Arizona the right to petition the government for change and to come up with propositions that might bring change if they think that the government is not acting. I think it's wholly appropriate that we have those ideas embedded in our Arizona Constitution, and we should respect that the public has interests in promoting things that they think is going to improve the operational world that we live in. Now the problem is when it's harebrained, we need to make sure that we understand that really carefully. We need to understand that it may not be a good thing, and we need to address why the proposition that a petition might offer is not the appropriate thing to do. So we have to be ready to challenge it, but ultimately it may depend on the public telling us what they want. So I have no problem with the public putting forth a proposal that gets voted on, and then we have to live with the consequences. That's what a democracy, a republic that we have, that's how we operate. So I have no problem with that petition process at all. If it's a issue that I think is inimical, I need to let the public know why we think it's inimical. Thank you.
Mr. Kenny, my second question for you are, what are your thoughts on fair chase as it applies to hunting and the ever-changing technology that produces better and better equipment and tools for sportsmen?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier in one of my comments about using and understanding technologies that people are using that might give them some knowledge about hunting that the Game and Fish isn't aware of, and being aware of the different apps that people are using. I think that that we really do need to enforce rules about hunting so that we can do traditional hunting in ways that we've enjoyed for hundreds and thousands of years. I don't think that technology is the panacea for hunters. I think it requires skill and sportsmanship, and my emphasis would be on trying to sustain rules and policies and permits that require sportsmanship as opposed to any sort of unfair advantage through technology. So I would try to limit those technologies in some ways and say, you know, if you're going to be able to go out and do your hunt like a robot, we don't want that. We want the human interaction involved in the process. And so, although I love technology and I think we can use it to gather information and to share, we need to keep sportsmanship in the process. And so all the rules and policies and the permits that we come up with an issue would have that in mind, that this is about preservation of species, it's about sportsmanship, it's about good management, and so we want individuals to set aside their technologies and focus on the sportsmanship aspects of hunting.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Tell us about how you see the role of the commissioners in interacting with department employees and pushing objectives.
I think the world is changing a bit, and so I understand that Game and Fish is a distributed organization. People here on the Carefree Highway and people throughout the state. And I want to trust in individuals to make the right decision on how they manage their time and efforts. And I presume that they're doing the work that they set out to do. So I want to encourage Game and Fish employees to do their job, to be out there in the field or in the office doing their job and reporting up on what they see, what the conditions are, and how things have changed, what's happening within the organization, how they feel about management policies. It's very good to have dialogue with individuals. And sometimes the rules that the commission might establish for management need to change over time. I'll give you an example. I have a colleague who was in the Corps of Engineers with me, different agency obviously, who wanted to move to Flagstaff and work remotely. His argument was, well, I'm sitting at a computer in the office and I go out in the field to go do investigations or to work with people on projects, but I'm in the office and I can do that from anywhere. I'd like to move to Flagstaff, can I do it? And at the time the agency said no. And the reason is because they had a big building, federal government was leasing space, they were bringing people downtown, people were spending money to support the local community, and that was sort of the thought that that's how the federal government should act, the agency should act. They should be there and be present where the public could see them in a public facility. Well, coronavirus came along, all that went out the window, and so now that agency, I still speak with them regularly. My next boss was at my house a couple nights ago, and everybody's working remotely, and they're working from all over the place, and they seem to be getting their work done. And so the fellow who was an exceptional employee who wanted to work from Flagstaff was told no. He left the agency. We lost a good person, but it was the wrong time for him to ask that question. Even though he had the right idea in mind, it was the wrong time. And so now people are working all over the place and they don't want to go back to the office. So the world impacts us in various ways, and this agency I see as being a distributed agency. They're out there already, they have been for years, working in different facilities and out on the road. And I think we need to provide them the tools so that we can communicate better, so that we can have good contact with them, that we can protect them, and that they can report up and down in new ways. So if we're not text messaging with our rangers, we should be. If we're not on the phone with them every day, if we're not exchanging information electronically, we should be, or more of it in new ways. And we should be trusting in them to be able to tell us how to get their job done. I want to put that responsibility of getting the job done on them and keep it at that level, rather than at some higher level. In terms of larger policies, just like the COVID thing that came up in the previous agency I mentioned, we're going to be impacted by things that are exogenous to our operations. COVID's going to come along from the outside and whack us, and there's going to be something else down the road. So we have to be flexible. We have to be able to look at rules and regulations and policies and figure out whether they need to be adapted, changed, discarded, reimagined. A lot of that process happens with the employees. I want to push the level of responsibility down to the employees, and as long as we have good communication, I think the commission sets the direction, sets the policy, and then the employees carry it out. So as a manager type, I want to make sure that we put the emphasis where it needs to be, and I think that that is in our trained professionals who are out there doing the job. They're going to know it better than I will ever know it. All I can do is recommend that we're managing our resources wisely and our monies wisely, and I may have to make an adjustment with money with all of you, or with a policy or with procedure, but I want them to tell us how it's working and how it could be improved. So I really think that the level of responsibility is on those individuals out in the field to make Game & Fish a success. And then we can reflect that and reward them and celebrate their successes. We need to promote their successes. We need to let the public know how the agency is doing. But the doing is done by the people in the field, and so we need to celebrate them and make the larger public aware of the good job that they're doing. That's how I would proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed your presentation, and we'll be in touch.
Is that it?
Do you have any closing comments that you'd like to make?
I saw it as a wonderful opportunity to continue to contribute, and I would look forward to the job. I am up to the task, and I'm ready to participate wholly in all the activities, attend all the meetings and all ancillary activities that I'm requested. I'm a very personal individual. I love individuals. I'd like to speak with each of you to understand your history and your role, and how we could cooperate and work together to make things happen. I don't think I have the answer to anything except by working with other people to come up with an answer together. So that's how I would approach the process. And if I have that opportunity, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to take a small break, or?